All right, so before we do the story, then I'm going to give you guys some background, some important, and I think most of you guys already know this, but the story is about Abraham and Isaac, and Abraham is a guy called by God to leave his family and to go to a land that God will tell him to go to and give to him. And and Abraham completely faithfully leaves his family, takes his wife and his cousin, and they go to this new land. And when Abraham goes there, God gives him another promise, and that is that he'll have this land forever, and that he'll have enough descendants, a whole nation worth. That his descendants, his family is going to be more numerous than the stars in the sky, God says. But Abraham has some questions about this, because Abraham's already pretty old when that promise is given to him, and he doesn't have any kids at that point. So how in the world is he going to have a family? But God tells him to be faithful, and eventually, at the age of 100, Abraham has his son Isaac. And then God comes back to him and tells him specifically, Isaac is the son through whom you're going to have that whole nation of descendants. So Isaac is the child that God promised to Abraham in order to fulfill his promise that he'll have a nation's worth of descendants. So that is the background that you need to know as we get into this. And next, we start our story. So at this point in the story, Abraham is pretty happy. He's in the land that that God called him to, and that God said he's going to give him forever. And he's got the child that's going to grow up and have his grandsons and then his great-grandsons and on, so that his people become a nation of descendants. So he's in a pretty good place. He and Sarah, they're pretty old, but they know that the promises that God made for them have been fulfilled. And then God comes to Abraham and he says, go to Moriah, which is a region nearby, and take Isaac and sacrifice him to me. Kill him and sacrifice him to me. And Abraham, surprisingly maybe, doesn't argue, doesn't say anything. He gets up, he gets the materials ready that he needs, and he takes Isaac and a couple of servants, and off they go. And they journey for 3 days to get to Moriah, and then Abraham sees the mountain where he's supposed to sacrifice Isaac. So they leave the servants behind, and up the mountain they go, just Abraham and Isaac. And on the way up, Isaac turns to his dad and says, hey, Dad. And Abraham says, yes, son. And Isaac says, where's the offering? What are we offering to God? I see we've got the wood, I see we've got the fire and the rope, but we don't have a lamb. We don't have something to offer. But Abraham says, God will provide the lamb that we're going to sacrifice. So they get up to the top of the mountain, and Isaac doesn't have any idea what's coming. And Abraham gets the altar all set up. He gets everything ready to go. And then he takes Isaac, and he kind of holds him down and ties him up and puts him onto the altar. And he gets the knife, and he lifts it up. He's about to sacrifice his son Isaac. And then God speaks from the heavens and says, Abraham, stop. And Abraham says, what is it, God? What's going on? And God says to Abraham, you don't have to sacrifice Isaac. Don't lay a hand on him. Now I know that you wouldn't even hold back your only son, the child of promise, from me. And Abraham looks to his left, and there's a ram caught in the bushes. So he and Isaac get that, and they sacrifice that instead. And then they head back down the mountain and head home. And God comes back to Abraham and reiterates the promise that he'll have a nation of descendants, and says, now that I know that you won't even hold your son back from me, once again I promise you, you're going to have a nation full of descendants. Your people are going to fill up the earth. And Abraham and Isaac head home, and we never hear about the story again. So there's the story. So I want to know what kind of questions come to your mind about the story.
How did Isaac react when his dad's like tying him up and about to put him on the altar?
Yeah, the Bible doesn't tell us, but I'm sure that must have been terrifying, right? Yeah.
Remind me later, I have a satirical comic about this that I need to show you.
Okay. So are there things that are confusing that you don't understand? What kind of questions do you have about it?
This is just a thing that I've always wondered. If not about like the story specifically, but like when they said that like God told them to do this, like did they like physically hear him, or did they hear him through like thoughts, or like what?
We're never really told what that is, but you know, the Bible doesn't really seem to say anything other than they heard it. So it kind of sounds like sometimes God comes to people through, like he uses people as messengers, but a lot of the times it just kind of seems like they hear a voice, or maybe it's in their thoughts, but we don't really know.
More of a, I guess, a personal opinion question.
Yeah.
Do you think the ram is supposed to be symbolic of anything?